When speaking about injustice, we are used to hearing of two actors, a victim and a perpetrator. Just after the Jewish Holocaust and the Second World War, thanks to Raoul Hilberg, we began to speak of three actors, no longer just victims and perpetrators, but also bystanders, those who stood by and did nothing while injustice occurred. When speaking about injustice in the South African context, there are still problems with only having these three labels, and with the labels themselves. Firstly, very few people like to call themselves victims. They say it makes them feel weak and disempowered. For this reason, I added other words to describe what it must be like to suffer injustice, words such as dishonoured, harmed, or damaged by experiences of injustice. When it comes to the label perpetrator, few people are brave enough to own up to committing injustice, and few people could be said to have directly committed an injustice. In the South African context, people like Cecil John Rhodes and H.F. Verwoerd are easily recognised as being perpetrators of injustice. But under colonialism and apartheid, most people merely followed unjust laws in South Africa. For example, they went to the army to defend the apartheid regime, or accepted jobs unfairly reserved for them, or went to school heavily subsidised by government just because they were white. When it comes to injustice, it's therefore important to distinguish between those who designed injustice, an architect perpetrator, and those who went along with injustice, an implementer perpetrator. When it comes to the label bystander, this word often seems distant and few are able to identify with it. People might be more likely to admit to doing nothing if the words ostrich, silent, or avoider are used. But even adding these new descriptions still does not allow everyone in South Africa today to locate themselves in the conversation about injustice. I'd suggest that two new categories are needed. The first is that of resistor, those who opposed injustice then and those who still oppose injustice today. And like the category of resistor, we can distinguish between someone who planned and led resistance as an architect of resistance, like Nelson Mandela and Lillian Ngoyi, and those who followed their lead, an implementer of resistance. The second new category to add is that of beneficiary, those who benefited from injustice, although they may not even have been alive at the time. Beneficiaries may also include those who benefited from resistance to injustice or redress because of injustice. There's lots to discuss about this point, I'm sure. However, just changing the triangle to a pentangle and adding new words to describe each category gives more people an opportunity to locate themselves and join in the very important conversation about injustice, and therefore also a conversation about restitution.